Assalamu alaikum everyone. I have something interesting I want to discuss today regarding why the US supports Israel always. And it's two reasons for that. The first reason is that no matter what Israel does, it is good for US foreign policy. It is good for political and security reasons. Political as in the evangelical Christian base and the Zionist movement, the Zionist lobbyists, of course, with the billionaire donors, they're both pleased with that, of course. And for security reasons, especially for someone like Biden, who said in the 1980s in his speech that if there wasn't an Israel, we would make a new one. And also the $3 billion they give Israel every year is the biggest investment for security. So clearly that is a reason that they would support Israel no matter what. And of course they would say in public, oh, we don't really agree with what Israel does, or they never told us what they're doing, but we agree with them, kind of. We agree with what they did. Or, oh, they told us some of what they did, and so we know some of what, like they're mixing they don't even know what they act like they don't know anything, but they know. Mossad and the CIA, they work together. They know exactly what's going on. So the US is more than happy to let Israel do its dirty work for them, to do the work that the US cannot do in the Middle East, with the exception of Iraq and Afghanistan. Afghanistan, for you non-Arab native speakers. Well, I'm not really a native speaker myself because I was born in the US, but enough about me. So anyway, regarding, of course, that was a disaster, right? Iraq and Afghanistan were a disaster politically for politicians in the US. Even though at the time when they first happened, even Democrats, when Iraq first happened, the media made it seem like it was a good thing going into Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, like, oh yeah, it's 9/11, democracy, all of that, spreading democracy, taking down tyrants that fund terrorism. That was their excuse, but really they just wanted the oil. And Afghanistan, of course, they were like, oh yeah, it's they were hiding Osama bin Laden or whatever. But Afghanistan, you can never conquer Afghanistan no matter what, because it has such mountainous terrain. Like it's crazy how big it is. Many countries failed at that. Several countries, Russia, the UK, was it Rome before? I don't know if I'm mistaken there, but the US of course failed there. Yeah. So anyway, regarding the second reason why the US would allow, and the first reason still stands, by the way. The first reason is there. It's no matter what, the US is happy with what Israel is doing. They are happy. They could say all they want for the rest of the world in media, in American media and everything. Oh, we don't approve of what Israel is doing. No, we reject what Israel is doing, and we would not be okay with Israel attacking a nuclear facility in Iran. Yeah, right. Okay, let's be real. They would be plenty okay with that. Because once again, the hands of the US is washed clean. All the dirty work is being done by Israel. Yeah, that's just how it's always been. Israel is the monster that the US is happy to have an alliance with, and but of course, it could be perhaps that this monster got too big for the US to tame, so to speak. You cannot tame this monster. You can't, like, maybe at some point the US thought, or the US government, they believed that they can control how Israel does things, so that it's more to so that there's less public outrage, there's less negative, uh, you know, negativity and less criticism of how the U.S. is letting Israel doing all of these crazy things. Uh, but now, no, it's too late. It's too late for that, because if you look at someone, for example, like Richard Nixon, he talked about the Jewish lobby when he was the president. Of course, you shouldn't say the Jewish lobby. Those were his words, though, not mine. So it's really more the Israel lobby. In the Israel lobby, it's a bunch of groups like AIPAC that are funded by billionaires, by those connected to Israel, and including CEOs of companies and whatnot, politicians, whoever has connections with them. They're going to push politicians to do things that are in Israel's best interests, of course. The thing is, though, this is Israeli lobby, and here's the thing: even when the president doesn't really agree with what Israel wants, even if he doesn't want to go along with what Israel wants exactly, no matter what, though, Israel is going to get its way. So if you look at someone like JFK, for instance, before he got assassinated, actually there's a conspiracy going on that, and it may very well be true, actually, that he did not want to send weapons to Israel. He did not believe that it was an investment to be sending money to them every year. And oh wow, what do you know? He got assassinated afterwards. But that's not the only thing, though. If you look at the power of a president, how much power a president has or doesn't have, you look at someone like Richard Nixon, for example, who talked about the Israeli lobby. And actually what happened was he was dealing with the Watergate scandal, of course. And during that time, he was like drunk. He was incapacitated. He couldn't make decisions for his country. And so what happened was his Secretary of State, what's his name? The Secretary of State at the time, like he's famous in global politics and everything. What's that guy's name again? We were just talking about. Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, yes. His Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, him and four others within Nixon's administration, including the admiral who was the head of the Joint Chief of Staff, and the security advisor, and someone else as well. They actually took over for Nixon, and they decided to authorize the release of the U.S. Army B-52 bombers, weapons, soldiers and weapons, to be sent to Israel to assist Israel during the Yom Kippur War. And during the Yom Kippur War, of course, Syria and Egypt first attacked Israel in order to get back territory that Israel stole from them in the 6 Days War, 6 years before that. And Russia actually was going to get involved, and they were telling the US, listen, we want to come and make sure that we keep the peace here, make sure nothing bad goes on here, because there was a truce during the Yom Kippur War afterwards, but then Israel attacked after that. They broke the truce by attacking Egypt, and Russia was coming in saying, listen, they were telling the US, are you going to come with us? If you come with us, maybe we could become peacekeepers, peacekeeping company in between them. But the US didn't do that. Instead, Kissinger and the others, they sent weapons, they sent manpower to Israel, and it was being filmed live that it was showing. So of course, Russia backed down. They didn't do anything after that, and nothing happened at the time. But in reality, Kissinger committed a crime. he was not an elected official, or the four others with him. They took an action that the president could have taken in the Powers Act. The president has emergency powers to make a decision that, let's say, he doesn't have time to talk with Congress about any decision that needs to be made for U.S. foreign policy. He has it in his power, in emergency powers, to do something if he needs to at the time, like really fast. But no, he was too busy being drunk. But also, they didn't go through Congress. They didn't go through the proper channels. And what happened was, instead, they took an illegal action. And then Kissinger gave the credit to Nixon after that. And so that's why there's a lot of people think that historically it was Nixon that sent these weapons, sent the manpower. But no, he didn't do that. That was Kissinger and his staff and the people on his team. But Kissinger escaped any consequences for that. Of course, Kissinger, he's a Jew. He's a Israeli supporter. To him, what matters more than applying the rules and doing things the right way through proper procedures in the U.S. No, what matters to him, no matter what, is that you assist Israel, no matter what. Israel needs help, we're going to give it to them. And a war could have broken out at that point. It very much could have broken out. World War III could have broken out. So yeah, there was someone on the inside, a high-ranking official within the White House, who you could say was definitely part of, he was, you could say even groups that Israeli-linked groups, they helped to prop him up in the government. That's definitely a no-brainer. That's definitely, for sure, that's true. And you got other administrations, this happened. I mean, if you look, for example, Anthony Blinken, he is a Jew first, as he said when he came to see Netanyahu after October 7th. And clearly, with Biden's issues going on, he's got some amnesia, some mental issues going on. You have Anthony Blinken stepping up for him and making promises on his behalf and acting on his behalf. So, and you have Blinken, of course, saying all the things, we're concerned about what Israel's doing, but no, he's not concerned. He loves what they're doing. They love what they're doing. And it's just easy for him to get Biden to sign off on weapons packages, all those mass spending, like a huge amount of spending that they're spending for Israel. For sure, Blinken was one of those that convinced Biden, even though Biden would have no problem saying yes to this, because he's a proud Zionist. He's a proud Zionist himself, who believes that, oh yes, this is like the biggest security investment for us. So he would have no problem sending off that. But of course, even if Biden did have some kind of doubt, like, maybe it doesn't look good politically for me to do this, Blinken would be able to push him a bit. Like, oh no, we have to do this. We have to, no matter what, because Israel is our brother in arms, and we must fight these terrorists or whatever. And they're always going to have their own, like, oh, we're the good guys kind of thing. And the good guys are never wrong. The good guys are always right, even when they themselves are being the terrorists, of course. Good guy syndrome. So, of course, if you fast forward a little bit after Nixon to Reagan, like a decade later, or almost a decade later, Reagan himself was calling what Israel was doing in Lebanon at that time. There was a war there, and thousands were being killed. He was calling it a genocide, what they were doing. Biden never saw it that way, of course. He was like, oh, we would do the same thing to Canada if Canada attacked us or something like that. So, and that's why Reagan made the phone call afterwards. He made the phone call, and he was telling the then prime minister at the time, that if you don't stop this right now, we're going to stop sending weapons, we're going to stop sending money, we're going to stop sending anything. And then they stopped. They stopped. But the funny thing is that after the phone call, he looked at his advisors, his group of people surrounding him, and he said, I didn't know I could do that. He didn't know he could do that. So was Reagan scared that he couldn't, that maybe they would say no and he would keep going? Really? But then again, maybe there's a reason for why they listened to him at the time. Maybe. And that reason is that there were some Israelis at the time that had sympathy for the Lebanese people and even had some sympathy for the Palestinian cause. So it wasn't like it is now. They were not as brainwashed as they are now. It wasn't as sophisticated back then with the AI since the early 2000s, with the ads, with the embedded advertisements that that they have in video games for kids and stuff like that in Israel. And even in other parts of the world outside of Israel, where they make it look like, oh, Palestinians are the baddies, and Muslims, Arabs, whatever, they're the bad guys. So, but at that time, it wasn't like that. There were some Israelis that saw what Israel was doing to Lebanon as a crime, as war crime possibly. So there was some sympathy there. And of course, there's going to be some sympathy in the US as well for the Lebanese as well. So perhaps the Israeli government at that time were like, you know what, we're pushing our luck if we test the patience of the US. And the US itself, it would be hard for them to really, like, there was not as much influence within their government from this Israeli lobby to really push them to keep sending weapons to, or to stop them from not sending weapons. Maybe it wasn't as bad at the time, but right now it's incredibly bad, I would say, because the Israeli lobby is too deep into the U.S. Congress. There are many Congress people that they have dual citizenship. They have, one of the U.S., with Israel. So they often want to decide things that put Israel first. Even though they are Americans living in the US, a lot of these politicians, they don't need much from the Israeli lobby to push for the US to always send the aid, always send financial and weapons and all kinds of things to Israel. Aid that, of course, there's a lot of money involved in this aid, and this aid goes to the free healthcare, free education, free housing in Israel, and free housing for the people, the illegal settlers, for the settlers that come from the US, from the UK, from wherever. And these settlers, they have criminal past in their former countries. So they come into Israel, they settle on land in Palestine, like, oh, this is your land now. And it's all free. And it all comes from the American taxpayer. Yeah. So perhaps right now it's the Israeli lobby, Israeli politics, everything Israel is embedded too deep into the American government, too deep. They are one and the same now. That's why you could say it's, even if the president decided, but of course, him and Kamala Harris, the vice president, they were cheering when Hassan Nasrallah was killed. They were cheering when Yahya Sinwar was killed. And all these other people, all these leaders, Hezbollah, Hamas, and whoever from Iran, they were cheering for them when they died. So they're very happy with what's going on. But from a media perspective, there's a lot of negative feedback, a lot of criticism, even from among their own American citizens. And yet they are still, like, it's like they're willing to ignore all of that, because maybe even if they did want to stop them, they can't. Because Israel, the monster that is Israel, has grown too big for the US to actually stop. It's, nothing can be done now. So, I mean, they deserve each other, to be honest. They really do. So this is all I gotta say about that. I hope you understand a little bit more about about U.S. Israeli relations, about why it is the way it is. And but yeah, definitely it is the Israeli lobby. Israel has been grooming politicians to in the US to always stand for Israel. Always. Like that is why, and it took years, but when you that's why it's impossible for the US to do anything about it, even though technically they agree with everything Israel's doing, because Israel to the US is Hezbollah is to Iran. But the difference is Iran and Hezbollah, they have their intentions are a lot nobler, you could say, because if you look at the history, if you study the history of Iran and Lebanon, uh, the U.S. multiple times have tried to do regime change to try and they got involved in Iranian politics, and there were assassinations, and Mossad committed many assassinations of nuclear scientists, academics, whoever. Uh, and Lebanon, of course, Hezbollah formed because of like Hezbollah did not even exist when Lebanon was being attacked by Israel at the time. So really, Hezbollah came about as a defense against Israeli aggression on the southern border of Lebanon. So that border, there's going to be a fight there. Of course, there is. They're going to defend themselves there, rightfully so. And Iran, so many times the U.S. media has made it look like the bad guy, but really, the Iranian government used to be a lot. Like you can have as many criticisms as you want of the Iranian government as you want, but you can't just have it both ways. Like you're gonna have to criticize the U.S. government as well. You can't. You have to be fair. Yeah. So the Iranian government before the U.S. got involved in regime change just because they didn't like the ruler of Iran at the time, because he had pro-Russian sentiments. It's all about the pro-Russian sentiments with the U.S. Like for example, when uh, when Kissinger sent the army over to Israel to help them, it was because of the Russians, their enemies. They have to fight the Russians. It's all about uh, fighting the Russians, keeping the Russians from gaining influence over them, having more influence of other countries compared to the U.S. That's geopolitics, of course. But another thing that I just want to mention before I close this video is that even though it's a little bit unrelated, it kind of is related because it concerns Russia itself. If you look at Barack Obama, for instance, oh wow, his Middle East policy was awful, of course. And, all the Arab Americans know this, the Muslim Americans, the Arab Americans. Maybe your average white American will not realize this, but his Middle East policy was awful. But another thing that people don't really realize is that in 2014, there were elections in Ukraine, and there was a president. The president was elected. He was elected democratically. It was a fair election, and you had UN monitors, election monitors, saying that it was a fair election. And then Obama had I don't know, some kind of special ops group, someone CIA, whoever, they were involved in Ukraine in order to get rid of him, because the Ukrainian president at the time, before Zelensky, he had pro-Russian leanings. So of course, I'm just saying that Russia it's an enemy of the U.S. And even though at the time of the Yom Kippur War, Russia was willing to work with the US as peacekeepers. Now, the US could say, oh, you know what? They try to make themselves look like the good guys, the rational guys. And if we play ball with them, if we join them in doing as they mentioned, we're going to look like the ones who listen to Russia, and Russia becomes the heroes. They all of a sudden, Russia are the heroes of the story. Oh, they're the ones who that help to bring about peace to the conflict or whatnot. We should not really care about who brings peace or who ends the conflict or anything like that. But that's where we are in the geopolitical world. You know, you got to show who's the, you know, you can't have somebody else take the victory for something good happening in the world, because that's unfair to you. Never mind the hundreds of thousands, even millions that have died just because of this uh, this caveman mentality, you could say. It is a caveman mentality. Uh, no, I deserve credit, not you. You're trying to make me look bad. Just work with them. Who cares if you have disagreements or whatever? I mean, then again, these disagreements, these cold wars, these espionage and all of that, that is mostly on the US, to be honest, because for every accusation they put against Russia, against Iran, against Lebanon, against other countries, the US themselves does it a lot more often. That's what they do. That is their game, to put a lot of confusion with their and well, with other countries, to fool their own civilians into thinking that the US is always the good guy and Israel is always the good guy as well, even though it's unraveling, even though a lot of people these days are realizing how not true it is, that the Israeli government is truly monstrous in its actions. And the whole tactic of let's commit lots of war crimes to make them bow their heads and say, okay, we'll let you be our masters, that's not going to work anymore. It's never worked. The resistance is coming. The resistance is here to stay. It's never going away. So the U.S. is fully. It's clearly it's incapable of stopping Israel. It probably doesn't want to anyway, but it's too far now. It's gone too far, and they're at that point where it would look bad for the U.S. It would look weak for them if they were to back out now and say, "Oh, we can't keep giving you whatever you want, Israel," because that just says to the world that the U.S. for many years, all the things that it says about Israel, about how oh it's our biggest security, you know, like our biggest what do you call it? Like the biggest investment in our security, right? That's what they're saying. Oh, they are brothers. They, you know, they're like our fellow democracy, in the Middle East. Like all of that would be a lie. So the U.S. they can't admit that it's a lie. They are too egotistical. Their egos are too big. Uh, it's they would rather, you know, fall down. Like they would rather everything falls down, the whole world goes against them, possibly in a war, a world war happening, than to admit they are wrong, because that would mean that they are the baddies, that the US are the bad guys. And no, we can't have that. So all these other countries are the bad guys, including the ones that are standing against Israel right now, including Norway and Spain and in Ireland, of course. All these other countries are starting to stand up and realize, yeah, this is wrong. This is so wrong. And the occupation, the apartheid that Israel is committing has to finally end. Anyway, I have nothing else to say right now. I'll keep posting more videos in the near future. And inshallah, you all have a good day. Take care of yourselves.